this is the frontal bone up here. Okay. This is the nasal bone. This is the maxilla. This is the mandible. This little hole is the mental foramen. These little ridges are the alveolar process. This is the zygomatic bone. This is the zygomatic arch. Okay. This is the mastoid process. The external acoustic or auditory meatus. The occipital bone in the back. This is the hyoid bone. Cervical vertebrae. First cervical vertebrae is, you know, see it, is the atlas, and the second cervical vertebrae is the axis, and that axis has that, this is it right here, and it has that odontoid process or dens on it, which you're not going to be able to see because it's up underneath there. Okay, so these are cervical, these are thoracic, these are lumbar, this is the sacrum, this is the coccyx. Okay, these coxal bones. It's then the different parts of it you'll learn. Okay, the ribs. There are 12 pairs. First 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are true ribs. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are false ribs. And these are floaters, floating ribs. Okay. This is the sternum. This part up here is called the manubrium. This is the body. This is the xiphoid process. This is the clavicles. Okay, sometimes called the collarbones. Okay, we have the humerus, the radius, the ulna, the carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. We have the femur. Just raise it up here. Okay, so this is the femur, it's the patella, tibia, fibula. I'm going to bring it up. Kind of doing a high kick here. Tarsals, metatarsals, phalanges. Okay. What else, girls?
I think that's everything.
That's about it. I mean, you're going to need to know the different parts of this, but in here, okay, in here, it's this lacy area. Can you see that? The lacy bone. All right. What happens is that you have olfactory nerves that come off your brain, and those are the ones that give you your sense of smell. And so they rest on either side of the crista galli.
That little thing is a crista.
Yeah, the little thing that's sticking up in the middle is the crista galli. Okay, so they rest on there, and then they send their nerves down into those holes that are in the cribriform plate, and those go down into your nasal cavity, and that gives you your sense of smell. Okay, so if that gets broken, then you can lose your sense of smell because it could damage those nerves. All right, that is now this crista galli, which is right here in the middle. Okay, it's resting on that plate, is the same bone as this vomer that's dividing your left nostril from your right nostril. Okay,
So the one on the bottom.
it's this one right here. Okay, that one right there, and that's all one continuous bone going up to the crista galli. So that's, if you break your nose, you get that shoved up, it could shove this bone up into your brain. So that's the one where they say, you know, hit somebody in the nose and then run, you know, if you want to. It's not going to kill them, not right away, unless they don't go to the doctor. And if this bone goes up in the brain, it can cause brain infection and they die from that. Okay, but that's sometimes how people end up, you know, losing their sense of smell or whatever. Okay, so that's the crista galli in there. So we have the cribriform plate on the sides, the crista galli down the middle. Okay, you come back this way, and this is the thing that they call it the bat bone, because it kind of looks like a bat, okay? And I think it kind of reminds me of a ray, like a manta ray or stingray, with the horns, you know, the mouth parts coming out. Okay, well, right here, going into this horn, you can see where it's coming out, okay, through the eye. That's what's called the occipital foramen, and that's where the optic nerve comes off the brain and goes into the eye, okay? So you're going to need to know that. Okay, so this is a review. We got the cribriform plate, the crista galli, the optic foramen. This thing right here that looks like a saddle is the sella turcica, and it commonly means Turk's saddle, and that's where the pituitary gland rests. So if a person has a tumor on their pituitary gland, one of the ways that they get to it is they actually go up through the nose to get to it. Okay, they go up through this plate. All right. You have the greater wings and the lesser wings of the sphenoid bone. Okay. My thumb right now is sticking through the foramen magnum, or magnum foramen. What comes up through this hole? The what?
Vertebrae.
No, the vertebrae don't come up through there. What comes up through there?
The spinal cord.
The spinal cord. Yeah, that's the spinal cord. So the back part of your brain rests down in here, and the spinal cord comes up through there and attaches to the brain. Okay, so that's the biggest foramen you have in your body. Okay, and foramen means hole. All right. I'm thinking that's all really that you need to know into this area. I told you on the diagram that you'd have to know all them other little holes too, but not for the practicum. Okay. All right. Bone. Okay. And this is a female skull, so she doesn't have those big tuberosities up here, but this is the male. And see, his is sticking out further. Okay, so that's the difference one difference between a male and a female. Okay. This bone up here, this is the maxilla, and this bone down here is the mandible. Okay. This is the zygomatic bone, and this is the zygomatic arch. I can show it to you on this side, Jenna. That's the arch. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to flip it over. Now we're looking at the underside. In fact, I'm going to use this one. Probably this one would be better. Okay. So when you see this, you see the teeth, you know you're looking at the underside of the skull. Okay, so some of the things on the underside. This big bump here, there's one on each side. That's called the mastoid process. Okay? Then right in front of that, right here, this little pointy thing, that's the styloid process. Stylus is something you write with. That's the styloid process. These here are the occipital condyles, because this is the occipital bone back here. So these are the occipital condyles, and the atlas articulates with this, or rests with this. Here we go. So it rests on here. If I get them, here we go. And it makes, let's go back and forth, the skull turn back and forth. So this is the atlas. Okay. All right. What else under here? This is the hard palate. Okay. This is the occipital protuberance. And on the male, it sticks out more. On the female, it's smooth. Okay? So that's another way you can tell a male skull from a female skull. Okay?
What is it called?
Occipital protuberance. It protrudes, it sticks out. Okay? All right. What else? Let me think here. I know I'm probably forgetting something.
We have to know that palate.
This is the palate.
Or the suture.
Yeah, that's the palate. Did I talk about the alveolar processes? Okay. You remember when where the teeth go into the jaw? Okay. Okay, the mandible or the maxilla, those are called the alveolar processes. They're kind of like ridges. Okay. What else? I'm thinking that's probably it for the underside. Okay, we did this. Now this one has the mastoid, but the styloids, since it was real bone, have been broken off, and they're real. This one's broke, the tip's broken off, and this one's broken off altogether. So if I have to use a styloid process, I'd be using this skull. Okay, if I want you to figure those out. Okay, what else? Okay, the jaw. Okay. This part here is called the ramus. This part here is the angle. Okay. All right, now I'm going to have to look at, I always get these two. I think this is the mandibular and this is the condyloid, but I'm going to have to look it up. Okay, so can you find me the jaw? No. You can turn them off for the time being. Okay. Because they get me confused sometimes. Okay, so, all right, this is the condyle of the mandible. This is the coronoid process of the mandible, and this is the mandibular arch. Or they also call it the mandibular notch, either way, okay? And then this is, like I said, this is the ramus, this is the angle, and I believe they call this part the body. And then this is the foramen, mental foramen, okay? A nerve goes in there. Okay. Right now, lumbar vertebrae, okay? This is the thoracic vertebrae. This is a cervical, okay? Lumbar has a big body, okay? Has transverse processes, spinous process, vertebral foramen, okay? Thoracic has transverse process, transverse processes, spinous process, vertebral foramen, body, okay? This is a cervical. This one has the bifid spinous process. It's divided, okay? Vertebral foramen, body, transverse processes. This one is the second cervical vertebrae. It's a little different. It has a body, but you have to flip it over to see it. It's right here. There's the body, okay? All right, but it has something that these other guys don't. It has this, and this is called the dens, or the odontoid process. Okay, so this one is called the axis. It has a special name. This one is the first cervical vertebrae, and it's called the atlas. It doesn't have a body. No body. It doesn't have a spinous process. Okay? It articulates with this, like so that you can turn your head back and forth. And then, remember what I told you about the occipital condyles on the back of this skull, right here? So this part articulates with that part, so that you can turn your head back and forth. Okay? All right, so that's how they all fit together. So we definitely know that this is the first one, and this is the second one. I'm not sure which one this is as far as cervical goes. This is definitely a thoracic, and this is definitely a lumbar. Okay? And these spinous processes that stick out, those are the things that you can feel going down your back. The bumps going down your back, okay? One other thing, I'm showing you compact bone and spongy bone. So this is spongy, and then this out here is compact, okay? And this is a medullary cavity that they talked about. And these little things that make up the spongy bone are called trabecula. Okay, those were the spiky things that you felt in the cows, in the bone marrow, if you felt that. Those are the little spiky things that you felt. Okay?